well, I think the personification of the government response to the pandemic, not just in the United States, but around the world, including here in Canada, has been Dr. Anthony Fauci. He's ubiquitous. He loves the media and they love him. There's a lot of unanswered questions about Dr. Fauci, and sometimes he's pinned down for a few moments in congressional hearings. Rand Paul has given him a run for his money and promises more. But I think the first time he really was grilled under oath by lawyers asking prickly questions, not softballs from the mainstream media, happened last week when a number of freedom-oriented lawyers, including the Solicitor General from Missouri, deposed Dr. Fauci in his office about a very specific thing, about the government of the United States trying to censor or throttle or silence voices that were skeptical of Dr. Fauci's approach, voices that one would call a second opinion, as we used to believe. And one of our friends, Jenin Younes, a lawyer for the new Civil Liberties Alliance, well, she was part of that legal team, and she was there in the NIH headquarters in Bethesda as Dr. Fauci was deposed. And she joins us now. Today she's in Annapolis. Well, Jenin, it's great to see you. I hope I got that right. It was just last week you were there examining, or deposing would be the technical term, Dr. Fauci. Just set the scene for us a little bit. Where was it? What does he look like? Who was in the room? How many folks were there? Tell us what it was like, the personal details. We'll get to the substance in a minute, but that must have been quite exciting.
Yeah, it was. So it was the day before Thanksgiving, which frankly, I don't think is an accident. A lot of the higher level officials that were deposing in this case keep scheduling their meetings right before, their depositions right before major holidays. I think so that there aren't so many reports of them. Let's put it that way. So it took place at the NIH headquarters where Dr. Fauci works, in a rather large conference room. And it was him and then a lot of lawyers, and a court reporter and a videographer. So there is a video recording and a transcript that can't be released right now for various reasons, although I think the transcript will come out next week, not the video. And then, so there was me and my colleague John Vecchione from NCLA were representing private plaintiffs in the case, the attorneys general of Missouri and Louisiana, who are also bringing the case on behalf of the citizens of their state, the Solicitor General of Missouri, who's leading the depositions, and then two clients, one of our clients named Jill Hines and Jim Hoft and his lawyer, John Burns. Jim Hoft founded the Gateway Pundit, and he's the only private plaintiff that's being represented by someone other than us. And then there were about I'm going to say 8 lawyers for the other side for Dr. Fauci.
Really? Yeah. 8 lawyers. I mean, I can imagine 2, and maybe even a couple of students or young helper-outers, but 8 lawyers. Why did they have 8 lawyers? Did all 8 weigh in? Were they all representing different government agencies, or does he really have 8 lawyers?
I think so. There was only one lawyer who was objecting. He's been at almost all of the depositions, or I think all of the depositions we've done in this case. I think it was probably interest. Like, there were more lawyers from our side present than there have been at the other depositions, because we're deposing a number of high-ranking government officials in this case. So I think people were just interested in seeing Fauci's deposition because he's such a big figure in the COVID era.
Yeah, big figure. I'm not sure if that's an ironic statement. What's he like physically? I mean, what's his comportment like? Did he seem happy and jovial? Was he impatient? Was he businesslike, detached? What was he like in person? I mean, obviously, it's not a fun way to spend a few hours. No. And by the way, how long was it?
It was so we got 7 hours to depose him. That's what the law allows, unless the judge says otherwise. And you take breaks. So it's, they keep careful track of the time. So every time it breaks, the time stops. So we were there for, I would say, almost 10 hours. Because you stop almost every hour. Questioning somebody, is, I think the person who's doing the questioning and answering it takes a lot of energy. So you break a lot. He was composed. He's very together. He would obviously get irritated sometimes when pressed. But he knew how to answer questions, and he's on the short side. He's, I think, shorter than the internet.
I was just making fun. Listen, I'm not the tallest guy around either. After what he's done to millions of Americans and people around the world. I have no problem making the odd personal jab back at him. I know I shouldn't. So just to refresh the memory of our viewers, I mean, we've jumped right into the details of Anthony Fauci himself, but the purpose behind this lawsuit is that the government was secretly interfering with, directing big tech companies, and actually having sort of a veiled threat that the big tech companies had better do it, that they had better censor contrary opposition views on the pandemic, including the Great Barrington Declaration, which was a bunch of scientists and doctors saying, whoa, we disagree with the government's heavy-handed approach. So this was trying to get at the government secretly working with and secretly pushing big tech companies to censor other voices. Am I right?
That's exactly right. Yeah. So we now, the government had made public threats. And when I say the government, specifically Joe Biden himself, Surgeon General Vivek Murthy, Biden's former press secretary, Jen Psaki, they had all made statements on the record saying that tech companies had better censor so-called misinformation about COVID. And they cite misinformation as things like questioning whether masks work, suggesting the vaccines don't stop transmission, questioning whether social distancing and lockdowns are a good idea. So they had been making these threats, telling the tech companies they'd better censor the so-called misinformation on these topics, or they would face repercussions in the form of regulation or other legal consequences. And the tech companies have long feared repealing Section 230, which protects them from liability for content on their platforms. So, that's really important for the tech companies functioning, because otherwise they have to sort of act as publishers if they can be held responsible for what people say. So, threatening them with repealing this is a very heavy-handed approach and had a real impact. The companies did start censoring people for, in response to this. And that's a First Amendment violation, because the government can't use private companies to accomplish what it otherwise couldn't. And the government cannot censor people for expressing certain viewpoints.
That's an excerpt from my show every night. It's called The Ezra Levant Show. That's me, Ezra Levant. You can see the whole thing behind our paywall. Well, there's a lot of goodies behind there. I do a show every weeknight. My friends Sheila Gunn Reid and David Menzies and Nat and Kat have their shows too. You get a ton of content for just $8 a month. There's so much in there you won't find anywhere else. Go to rebelnewsplus.com.